We are now streaming live. This is Charles Lincoln, New Orleans, Louisiana. William Daniel Johnson, President of the American Freedom Party from Los Angeles, California. We are now streaming live. This is Charles Lincoln, New Orleans, Louisiana. William Daniel Johnson, President of the American Freedom Party from Los Angeles, California. We are now streaming live. This is Charles Lincoln, New Orleans, Louisiana. All right. William Daniel Johnson, President of the American Freedom Party from Los Angeles, California. Okay, now let's try to start over again. I don't know what the triple play was all about, but I think I stopped it. This is Charles Lincoln from New Orleans, Louisiana, on Friday, December the 14th. Almost put us back in September. Let's dance the time warp again. It's December the 14th, 11 days till Christmas, and William Daniel Johnson, President of the American Freedom Party in Los Angeles, California. And what I have invited a guest who has to wait a few minutes, but I invited this particular guest because basically he and I have a lot in common. And I want Bill Johnson to know about and use his expertise as an attorney and student of the decline of white America to comment on it. Basically, William Daniel Johnson, William Todd Overcash is my guest. He is effectively a disbarred doctor, MD, from Ocala, Florida. He was at one point one of the top surgeons in the city of Ocala, one of the top surgeons in Florida, as a matter of fact. And he is a very distinguished gentleman to this day, but he has been destroyed. And I have been trying to convince him for the past 4 years, 5 years actually. I've known him for exactly 5 years this December. And in these past 5 years, I have tried to convince him that what's really going on is he was made a target, not so much because of anything particular that he did, but because his career and his life embodied the American dream. And I really, I visited his house most recently last summer. He lives, you're getting out of focus. Bill, you're getting out of focus. I don't know what you did, but you're okay now. He lives in this beautiful lake, Lake Weir, in Ocklawaha, right outside of Ocala, Florida. He has a spectacular house. He's got a little farm nearby, horses. And so he's managed to preserve some of his life, but his career is ruined. He's actually younger than I am by a year or two. And the instrument of destruction of his life was obviously not express discrimination against white people, but it was one of the things that has really, you know, everybody has their own story about how they completely woke up to what's really going on in this country. And as the very first thing I did after you appointed me to be membership coordinator for the American Freedom Party, I wrote this little piece, you may recall, on the need to abolish the family courts. Yes. I don't know if you had a chance to study or reflect on it, but it's based on my experience, on the experience of William Todd Overcash, and on the experience of literally hundreds of people I know. The family courts exist vampirically to suck the blood out of people and destroy their lives. It's a combination of the result of feminism, the rise of sociology and psychology as deciding factors in law, and all of this is closely related to the twisted world of civil rights. And I hope Todd's going to be able to join us, but if not, we'll talk about him this time, and then we'll talk about the whole problem generally this time, and then go on, maybe get him on later. But Bill, you're an attorney. I'm going to put you on the spot totally here. I'm a former attorney, but you're still the real thing. Are the courts fair to white people in the United States?
Well, you have, of course, a lot of different courts and a lot of different systems. Family court, which you've been talking about, is a very different animal than civil court or criminal court. Let me address the criminal court issue for a moment, and I'll deal with this particular sentencing that's upcoming for the convicted Charlottesville white nationalist by the name of Fields. I forget his first name. But what we had there is we had
119 years.
Yeah, you had a young kid who I believe had substantial defenses, defenses that would have mitigated a great deal of that, maybe even exonerated him completely. I was shocked when the verdict of guilty came out. And I think that it is a component of many factors, but the most prevalent factor is the fact that the jury was comprised of mostly white people. And white people are, by and large, determined to avoid being called racist, to avoid being accused of anything that supports their own feelings and backgrounds and history and heritage and national origin, because we've been so browbeaten. So if I were a juror, if I were on doing voir dire to select a jury, I would rather have a bunch of black men on there than white people, because they are bound and determined to bury their own people regardless of extenuating circumstances and exculpatory evidence, because they don't want to be accused in the press of being, oh, they let him off because he's white. They're racist. And that, I think, is the driving factor for the conviction of this boy. Of course, I didn't follow the case, so I'm just thinking, when it first happened, I looked at all of the evidence that was posted on the internet, with which the various videos showing that other people were attacking him and he was just driving to get away. I was shocked at that conviction. That, I think, is the jury aspect of it. White people convict their own like no one else. And it's the exact opposite when you have, for example, these black women who exonerated O.J. Simpson because he was black. So that's a system that we have today, and it might be a mobile issue that might be changing as time goes on. The other factor is the courts, the judges, and the officers of the court, the prosecuting attorneys and the defense attorneys, all have the same mentality and the same fear and trepidation. They will not move forward aggressively to protect their client if their client is a white nationalist. And you saw that when this kid was first charged, or when it first happened, you had the Attorney General of the United States, Jefferson Sessions, come out and say this was a hate crime, this was a terrorist act. You had the governor of the state, the mayor of the state, you had everybody come out and convict him without even any sort of semblance of fairness. And he was tried in the court of public opinion. And what did his defense lawyers do? Crickets. They came out and they said nothing. They were all afraid of coming to the defense of this boy. So yes, I believe that the courts, the system, is all biased against white people and is primarily our own fault.
I don't know that I've ever told you any of the details of the circumstances of my disbarment. It might be interesting to just give a little thumbnail summary of what was going on there. In 1997, I filed 7 civil rights lawsuits each one of them on behalf of middle to upper middle class white people. It resonated throughout Central Texas like a nuclear bomb, basically. It was on the news every single night, in particular because one of the defendants actually was another medical connection. It was the wife of the chief of surgery at St. David's Hospital in Austin, Gail Atwater. The city was Lago Vista, Texas. Atwater versus Lago Vista eventually made it to the United States Supreme Court in 2001. 5-4, they decided against us. In any event, this scandal about Lago Vista led James R. Nowlin, who is U.S. District Judge for Western District of Texas, senior U.S. District Judge for the Western District of Texas, to hate me with a purple passion, only in part because one of his best buddies, unbeknownst to me, was Frank Miller, Frank R. Miller, the chief of police of the Lago Vista Police Department. They were weekend golfing buddies. And needless to say, these cases really pissed off Frank Miller and a lot of the Lago Vista establishment. Lago Vista is basically a golfing community, golfing and boating community northwest of Austin. Anyhow, I was told over and over again that these suits I had brought were frivolous because civil rights lawsuits and the civil rights law in general is designed for racial conflict. When blacks are oppressed by whites, that's a civil rights problem. But when whites are wrongfully arrested by white police, especially upper class, you risk throwing the entire system into chaos. Because if everybody has civil rights, the system can't operate. The judge told me this, the FBI told me this, and the U.S. attorney told me this. But in particular, the FBI agent assigned to investigate me told me this. And this totally freaked me out because I had gone to the University of Chicago Law School, and they didn't teach us that in law school at all. They didn't teach us that, except with regard to historical origins in the Civil War period, there was any racial implication to the civil rights laws at all. It was equality. It was supposed to be about equality. But it turns out, I think, and tell me what you think of this, it turns out that the civil rights laws are designed to pull certain people down and other people up, and it has absolutely nothing to do with equality, but just reversing inequality. And this is the great, truth, justice, and the American way was this motto of Superman, right? But really, civil rights, I think, has become the great American lie. And the notion of equality has become the great American lie. As you just pointed out, even white people want to push themselves down because they have been sold this concept of eternal guilt, not just guilt for any specific acts, but, oh, here's Todd. That's good. Well, you got Todd. Anyhow, in the case of William Todd Overcash, who is now joining us, unmute audio. Todd, are we going to see you? Todd, you're unmuted. William Todd Overcash. New Orleans and Los Angeles are calling Ocala. Is William Todd Overcash able to hear me? He is unmuted. Someone is trying to silence you, William Todd Overcash. Is it you? As I was just saying, that the point of civil rights law in the United States today is to pull people down and not actually to guarantee equality. And I want you to tell us your story about how the courts pulled you down. But can you hear me saying this to you? I know Bill can hear me. He's not calling me. Okay. Just checking. Well, Todd, what do you think of what I mean, Bill, what do you think of what I've been saying while we wait for Todd to join us?
Yeah. Well, I do believe that there's a fundamental defect in our entire society on every aspect of it. And it's not just the courts. A court is maybe the problems with our court system is reflective of a larger, more fundamental problem that has permeated every aspect of our society and every institution, from our churches to our schools to our educational system and our employment, our jobs, our government agencies. Everything is designed to promote, I guess, to raise the other peoples and suppress the white race. It used to be that the idea was to provide equality for everyone, but it's so morphed into it now that our young people, our young white people, are demoralized because they don't have a future.
Well, I can hear Todd. What's going on? Todd called me while you were talking. Let's see, Todd, what's going on? Because oh dear. Well, that's bad because you got it to work the other day. You were on briefly about a month ago. Well, is your camera on? Okay. And what do you think caused this, Bill? What brought this about?
Well, I think it's about, like they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I believe that for much of America's society since just before I was born, maybe since World War II and until maybe the early 60s, the minorities were present in our country, but they were really kind of ignored. And I remember when they started calling them minorities, I began to think, and I was just a young kid, I thought, this is not a permanent designation because the minorities are going to become the majority. I thought that even when I was a kid. But they were kind of overlooked in society. They didn't appear in the movies, on the TVs. They were relegated to kind of a minor position, and there were the Jim Crow laws were effective in the South, but there were maybe even more pernicious dealings with them in the North and in the West. So I think the desire was there to maybe implement change, and so maybe the Civil Rights Act of 1964 had good intentions. Let's elevate these minorities to give them a chance, a hand up, but they didn't realize that it was really an act of pathological altruism, where every give of the white, every take by the non-white resulted in a shift in economic and social dynamics, so that now it's just the floodgates are fast and furious, and so the whites are truly on the verge of extinction because of this, what initially a good policy or good intended policy. And I think we need to change that. The problem is the white people still have such magnanimity and such altruistic sentiments that to get them to wake up and promote their own people, separate, segregate, and have our own ethno state is very hard for them to accept. But that's the monolithic approach we have to take. We have to move this monolithic idea of promoting other people instead of ourselves. We have to change that so that we promote our own. Otherwise, we will cease to exist in my children's lifetime.
In Todd's case, and he's trying again to join, but for some reason it's not working on his end. And I know he's got the equipment to do this because he actually did join us a couple of weeks ago. And so I'm just not sure what's going on. But in his case, I just want to tell a little bit of his story right now. You know, he had achieved the American dream. I mean, he did not come from a wealthy background. He was originally from North Carolina, small town North Carolina, and he went to medical school and he excelled at everything he did. I think his undergraduate major was biology or something like that. And he was achieving everything, and he married and had a single child. But I guess, you know, he kind of, as I did, married the wrong woman, without going into any details without him commenting on it. And this woman knew that she could use the family law system to tear his life apart and to basically, if not make herself as rich as he was, at least equalize them. Equalize them. And this equality, this notion of tearing down somebody else to build yourself up, is just astoundingly pernicious. And it's really too bad that he doesn't seem able to join us here, because the family courts system has been designed as, I don't know what you see. You say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I'm not 100% sure that the family courts were designed with good intentions. Florida was my very first state where I was admitted to the bar anywhere. And in Florida, you know, there was good legislative evidence that when no-fault divorce was adopted, they knew it was actually going to operate to make lawyers richer. This was discussed in the Florida legislature, and basically they got a bipartisan endorsement of no-fault divorce in Florida because it took the religious concept out of marriage, which was perceived as good in the 1960s, and they added this social concept of equality, which had originally been developed and in the Soviet Union. And
what do you think the solution is?
Well, I guess, you know, the solution has to be, I mean, some kind of resurgence of religion and morality in the country.
Let me just tell you some of the approaches and the systems that have been promoted and advocated in this country and in other countries. You have in Japan, divorce is not supervised by the courts, or does not have to be supervised by the courts. You just go into the city or the county and you cross off the family registry. You cross off the wife's name, and that's it. That's a divorce. Of course, they have to deal with it now when there's children and family to be taken care of. But traditionally, the wives were on the short end of the stick and they didn't have any economic security. They have to go back to their own family. And I think a lot of countries are that way. You have Lebanon, for example. Its family law is divided up into three different approaches. The Christians have one set of laws. The Muslims have another set of canons, laws, and then the Jews have a different set of laws. And so, depending upon your religion, you have different laws governing divorce and family relations. So that's how Lebanon deals with it. Then you have, and you and I were both probably involved with the Ron Paul movement. Then you have Ron Paul, who made many speeches saying that marriage should not even be involved. The government should not even be involved with marriage. It should be purely a private situation. You shouldn't have marriage certificates from the government, and the government shouldn't deal with the divorces as well. So those are things that are approached. So now we have Todd on.
We finally have Todd. Todd, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're kind of faint. I can't hear you very well.
All right. Can you hear me better now?
Much better. Much better. Okay. William Todd Overcash, I'd like you to meet William Daniel Johnson. William Daniel Johnson, William Todd Overcash. You go the entire length of Interstate 10 between you.
Hello, Todd.
Hello. I'm sorry. I was on my Asus computer. Wouldn't work, so I went on my wife's Apple, and it's working.
Excellent. Well, I'm on an Apple, so I think it's a good thing. Todd, have you been listening to us, and what would you like to comment about what we're saying?
Well, to me, it's very simple. I'm probably in some ways more radical than you. I think that we reached a stage in time that I think that the only way you're going to restore the United States to anything is literally a war. Because you have, it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you are more worried about you and what you call the government rather than the people. And the immunity now, whether you call it judicial or sovereign immunity, has so expanded to the point it's an absolute joke. And now even private corporations who are under subcontracts to the government are claiming sovereign immunity. I mean, I was very naive and very blunt with people in marriage and divorce and custody battles. I would never get married today if I was a young man. I'd hire a surrogate to have my child, and I'd hire a nanny to help me. But if my father was alive today, he was a career Marine, very honorable man for 23 and a half years, and he went down at the age of 42. He lived longer, but he was wheelchair bound and not able to speak well. He would be very dismayed. And as I told you, my mother died at 60, and her final Christmas present to me was 2 AK-47s, and I won't even tell you how many thousands of rounds of ammo. Her final birthday to me was newsy, because she knew what was coming. But the bottom line of it, you look at me, I'm no different than anyone else, really. But I mean, I graduated valedictorian in my high school.
That makes you different right there.
I attended my undergrad at NC State. And okay. I had, NC State is broken down into different colleges, engineering, ag life, all this. I was president of the ag life division. I was peer advisor.
So that's the University of North Carolina, you said?
NC State, yeah, North Carolina. I graduated cum laude because I took a course I didn't need to take just to finish up my degree, and it was a stupid course with athletes, and it dropped my magna cum laude, but I didn't really care. I got accepted with 1 month into my final year into medical school, so I really at that stage didn't care.
Where did you go to medical school?
UNC Chapel Hill.
Oh, Chapel Hill, wow, okay.
And it's very interesting when you look at Chapel Hill then versus today. Today, they had that big rally about taking down the statue.
Yeah.
When I was at NC State, let me give you a contrast between those two universities. NC State was majority male students, and you were surrounded by majority female colleges like Peace College and several others, which are now no longer one-sex colleges. They've whatever. Whereas at Chapel Hill, it was basically about 65% female, 35% male, and at that time, believe it or not, 50% of the males were gay. It's a very interesting scenario at Chapel Hill. Very odd. You have to remember, I came through when we knew AIDS existed, but we didn't know what to call it. There was no diagnosis. We didn't know the disease. And I remember a very enlightened infectious disease professor doing a very interesting lecture. He stated that AIDS would evolve and become like syphilis, because in the 1400s, people routinely progressed to stage 3 and died. With AIDS, if it progresses to death at a young age, you eliminate its agent to carry the disease. And he predicted that we would have subsets that would survive and all this. But, then I went there, I did my residency, I did fellowship, I went into private practice.
What was your specialty?
General and vascular surgery.
Right.
But I was old school in the sense that I did general, vascular, and I was full endoscopy qualified to do all endoscopy. So I was unique because I came from broad breadth training. I had left a fellowship in plastic surgery and went into a vascular fellowship. And I left that because my father was dying at that stage of game and I needed to spend time with my dad. And actually, Dr. Robichek, who is very well known, he has the largest, he's dead now, but he had the largest collection of Mayan art in the United States, probably one of the largest in the United States.
I knew him when I was an archaeologist. So
he was a very tough man, but he respected me and I respect him. But what I've seen now, things that stand out in my memory are the O.J. Simpson trial. I'm going into the hospital to do surgery, and the verdict came down innocent. Every white person was pissed, and every black person, whether they were just aides or educated nurses and doctors, cheered. And it was purely a race reaction. And now you look at men today, men are hated. And the most hated is a white male. I have no doubt. And for me,
successful white male.
Heterosexual, yes. And for me, you look at what I did. I took in 2000, I received a federal subpoena to appear before a closed grand jury. And the following day, they arrived with 5 federal agencies to my office. And they said, "You are friends with this person who was fired by this physician. And we are investigating him, and we expect you to wear wires. And if you don't, we're going to block you from billing Medicare for 1 year while we audit you." The reason that physician was under attack was her lover was a sitting judge. And then I met with a special prosecutor in 2012, and that judge was ordered to resign from the bench by 12/31/2013 or face loss of benefits from the state and prosecution. And he resigned. And a month before he resigned, he ordered me to jail for, quote, failure to show up to a deposition that had been canceled, and for, quote, being behind on child support, which I was not. And then I was beaten and molested, not penetrated, but molested by a deputy. And then you move forward From 1999-2000, you move forward to mid-2000. I requested an inquiry by the Food and Drug Administration of a Dr. Mary Sawaya. Her and her brother, who is now deceased from AIDS, her brother's deceased, she's alive. She graduated the University of Miami Medical School with a PhD. She couldn't pass her licensing exam, and she forged her medical license, obtained her DEA license, and she pled guilty in federal court, received no jail time and only a $144,000 fine. And her brother is a sitting 5th District Court of Appeals judge in Florida, who routinely, any case that comes before him involving my name, he attacks. And then, as you know, in 2012, I went to court to have my daughter get braces for crossbite. And the judge told me no. And he also told me no to her going to a magnet school. But prior to that ruling, he came to my office and asked me for class 2 drugs. And I pulled his eForce document, EFORSCE, and it showed that he was going to 2 of my colleagues, one the first Wednesday of every month, the other one the first Thursday of every month, and received from each of them a 90-day supply of class 2 drugs. But he was sitting on the bench as a, quote, senior judge in violation of the Florida Constitution, dying of cancer. He was under the influence of drugs. And I went to Tallahassee and reported him to the FDLE. And they told me that my life and career would be over and they would destroy me. And they've achieved that. This is about not only attacking, I think there's a lot of reasons white men are attacked. One, I think it's about people who are independent, type A, if you want to call us that, who will fight for what we believe in. They want us gone. And as is publicized on TV in many places, there are people who say we don't need type A personalities anymore. We need type B submissives. And that's what the government wants. And things that you all don't see that occurs in medicine. Have either one of you heard of something called disruptive physician? Okay. In 2006, they came out with a protocol about physicians being disruptive. It was advanced by the 5 largest law firms that deal with the major medical facilities. And basically, they came up with a very rudimentary definition of anything that a physician says to you that offends or bothers you, causes you any form of stress, is disruptive.
Oh, how interesting. That is so connected to everything.
It became statute in 2008. And then in 2009, it became reportable to the National Data Bank, which would prevent you from going anywhere to practice once you were accused. In the first 5 years of accusations, 98%, I think it was right around 96%, were surgeons. 2% were psychiatrists. And the other 2% were made up by the rest of the specialties in the world. But you have to remember what surgeons are. We act to save lives. We do not play games. We want to move and be done. And the other thing that surgeons did, which really irritated hospitals, was we said, we're leaving JCAHO. And what JCAHO was what certified hospitals for credentialing as a hospital. JCAHO was created by the American College of Surgeons and the American Hospital Association. And surgeons said, you all are creating too much red tape, too much esoteric, we leave it. And they started creating their own surgery centers. So surgeons became a subject of, we were independent and do what we wanted to, and they needed a way to bring us under control. And that's what's rapidly happening. The chairman of the trauma center at the University of Florida is a nationally recognized surgeon, and he is nationally labeled as a disruptive physician. They cut his pay 20%. He can never go anywhere else to practice. It is, and you got to remember what surgeons traditionally are. They're white men who are very independent, and forthright, and it's a destruction of that happening. So I'm sorry. I just find it very frustrating. And by getting rid of men in children's lives, children they have no direction, they have no guidance, and they become just party to look to the state to solve all things.
First off, what does JACO stand for?
Joint Accreditation Hospital. I've forgotten what it stands for, but
that's been replaced by what then?
No, JACO still exists. The American College of Surgeons left it, and now it's totally controlled by hospitals.
But I mean, it's interesting what you're saying, because I mean, obviously, that protocol that was instituted for doctors, for physicians in 2006, Bill, does that? I mean, I was not part of the bar in 2006. Does that correspond with about the time that they started telling lawyers what to believe and what not to believe?
Oh, I don't know that there's any timeline for that. I mean, you have every generation has its pressures from outside forces. I was just looking at disruptive physicians, and it's an whole area that I'd never heard of before, and it's something that's very interesting. Yeah, it's true. There is a lot of muzzling going on along. There's a lot of beating down of individuals on every profession, and what you've told me about is certainly food for thought. I do want to go back and address the first thing that you mentioned about, and in defense of marriage. I mean, I have been married for 40 years, and I have 5 grown children, and there's been no divorce on any side of my family or my wife's family for as long as we can go back generations. And like, I think my kids have 35 or more first cousins, because there's a lot of kids on all sides. Right. And so I come from a background of very stable family, a very good marriage, a strong family background, of which there have been, and I can say that it is the absolute best environment to build a society on. And so my experience are totally different than yours. I mean, I've never.
I agree with you. I grew up in a very tight family that was very extended, no divorces, and we did. Forget about just my parents. When it came to the family, it was all the brothers, sisters, cousins. We all did things on the holidays and everything together.
Yeah.
The problem is that out here in the majority of the world today, there's a benefit to having a child by 2 or 3 different men.
Yeah, that's one aspect of the breakdown of the family. I agree, and that is a lifestyle that's a lifestyle that I'm not familiar with, but I know that society has embraced that in large part, and that's part of the problem.
I think it was orchestrated. My opinion was it was orchestrated by the government when they moved forward with making divorce simple, and then they created a scenario where only one parent would be the guardian and the primary caregiver where the child lives, and the majority of the time would be the mother. The father was moved to the side, and therefore you create more of a elimination of the family. You create a scenario where the children do not, both parents raise children differently. One usually tends to be the comforter, and the other one tends to be the disciplinarian. We don't like to think of it that way, but that's the reality. You should stand together as husband and wife in these decisions, no doubt. But what we've done is we've created a scenario where it is beneficial to destroy the family. And if you look at the children across the country, it's not a good scenario. And it's not because I was poorly educated or came from a horrible family. Had nothing to do with that. What it stemmed from.
Todd, I want to ask you a question, and I mean, I realize it might be a painful question to ask, but I think I know something that you and I have in common that we don't have in common with Bill. I think that Bill's marriage was always, you know, am I right, Bill, that your family, everybody stayed in the same church, and your family, your relationship with your wife is basically intimately related to your religious life.
Well, first of all, my wife and I have never had a fight. We've had differing of opinions, but we've never had a fight.
Right.
And she came from a very wealthy background, and I came from an average background. She has a lot of brothers and sisters who are very successful, and so she wants to kind of compete and make sure that everything is perfect. And so, like when our kids come back for visits, she'll want to go out to the store and just buy everything possible just to make everything great. The perfect home. She tried to make the home as perfect in every aspect as possible.
Right.
And usually, I think finances is a big problem in marriage. But we were well off from day one. We've never had financial problems. We've never had a problem in our marriage, and none of our kids have ever tried drugs or alcohol. They've never done anything. So we've really lived a good life. But it's no different than my brothers and my sisters and most of my wife's brothers and sisters. And maybe that is a function of religion. I mean, I've gone to church every week for my entire life, and I will go to church every week for my entire life. But
I know that's one of the things that.
But yeah, you take a look at me. Okay, I went to church my whole life. My parents would have, I would call them fights. You would call them disagreements. There wasn't anything major. They would always stand together, and that's where I grew up. And I didn't grow up poor. I mean, I did grow up poor with my parents, but I've not been poor. And I've never been a greedy control freak or anything else. In fact, I've given away far more money than I've ever kept. But like for me, my first wife, I married her, and we were married for 7 years. I was Presbyterian, and she was Catholic. And she came to me one day and she said, "Todd, I know how important it is for you to have children. I don't know that I ever want to have children." And I was at an age where I knew the genetic issues that would arise if you wait too long. And she said, "We just need to go our own way." Now, the funny thing of it is, she was an only child. I was an only child. And we had a very simple divorce. And in the middle of the divorce, she called me to be prepared to do surgery on her mother, who was waiting on a biopsy diagnosis to whether she had breast cancer or not. And it was never an issue in that regard. She just knew that what I wanted. It was not an issue. We did many things together. The biggest thing was that she evolved to a point where she wanted something. I'm not sure what was going on with her. She was a physician assistant, and we had known each other for years. My second wife now was a nurse. The key there is she came from a family. When she was around the age of, I think, 13, her mother left her father and moved in with her father's sister's husband for 2 years. And then they switched back. And she had been married, and her first husband was diabetic, and she told me that he did not want to have children. And she told me he made her have her tubes tied before she was 21, which is illegal. And we went through having tubes untied, in vitro fertilization, lost a child. I took 2 months off from my practice, got her out of the country to let her relax after she'd been in counseling, came back, and we were successful. And then at 6 months of age, she hit me with a divorce. And we went into counseling and full psychological testing. Well, then the truth came out. She had told people that she was playing me, that I had money, and that she knew she had to sign a prenup with me, but the child would be her weapon, and that as soon as the child was born, she would divorce me. And when she went through formal psychological testing, she was formally diagnosed as a borderline with schizoid traits, which is absolutely more dangerous than a psychotic. Because a psychotic, is dangerous. I, on the other hand, my testing came out normal. And in fact, there's a question whether she actually killed my mother. Because my mother had gone through, she had gone through a lot, but she had had lung cancer. She underwent surgery. She underwent therapy and went 5 years without any recurrence. And then she had a single lesion occur. She had bilateral lung cancer, and they did specialized aggressive therapy on her. She went 5 years disease-free. And she had a single lesion in her left lung, and they decided to do surgery on her. She was in the intermediate care, recovering, doing quite well, and I get a stat page from the nurses telling me that they had to have security come in and remove my wife and her mother because she had blindsided me with a divorce. And my mother was found to be hypoxic and almost dead upon Lori walking out of the room. No one can prove what occurred, but she had been doing perfectly well till that point and was on the streak to go home. I've since learned very, very many times a lot of things, like she dated a guy who molested my daughter. And lucky for him, my divorce pitch went very high when someone hit me where they shouldn't hit me because I would have dealt with him. He no longer is in this part of the world. And basically, she is very dangerous. And like I said, her mom and dad went back together, but it's a very weird scenario. They've never had this tight, extensive family of things. It's very weird. Whereas now I am remarried now.
Right. But see, now, like I think you as a doctor, maybe you're, I guess, taken in by love and not by practical feelings. Like when I was a kid, I wanted to have a lot of kids, and I wanted the best wife possible. I was looking for eugenics, I wasn't looking for love. And, my wife's father was the head of the church in all of the western part of the United States. And her mother was a Juilliard musician, and she was a musician. She had everything going for her. She was Scandinavian. She came from a large family. They wanted to have a large family. And I on paper, I thought, this is what I want. The only problem with that is I wanted to marry her, but she wouldn't marry me. So it took me, I had to chase her for like 2 years and wouldn't give up till she finally married me. And when you go in that situation and you're so flattered that she'll finally marry you, you treat her with kid gloves even 40 years later. Right. So I wanted to have a large family. There's only two things I wanted in life. I wanted to work, and I didn't care whether it was a good job or a bad job. I just wanted to work. I wanted to have a large family, and I've had both of those, so I'm very happy.
Right, I understand. And well, that's like my wife today. She's a very good, strong woman. She's been through hell in her life. She's disabled from the military. She broke her back in the military and was paraplegic. She can walk a little bit now, but no feeling in her feet. But we have very strong views. She came from a large, strong family. And family is very important to us and always has been. But what you see in the majority of the world, which you may not see, is, first of all, you may not realize this, but 80% of children born in this country are born on welfare. Okay?
80%?
80%. Now, first of all, you have to remember something. I don't know about every state, but it tends to be true. Like in the state of Florida, if I'm an OBGYN and I have you come to me to deliver your baby and you have Blue Cross Blue Shield, I'm getting paid, don't hold these numbers as true, but I'm going to be paid $1,200. But if you come to me and you have Medicaid, the way the Medicaid billing system works, I'm going to get paid $2,000 to deliver your baby. but the majority are this. And then the problem of it is the majority of babies today born are born without a father being recognized on the birth certificate. And there's lots of reasons for that. It goes back to trying to undermine the foundations of the American family. Because divorce used to be taboo. Now, I agree, if there was abuse going on, that's one thing. But if you remember in the beginning, you had to go through a 1-year separation and all kinds of stuff. Plus, if you were an abusive husband back in the 50s, the family would straighten you out, if you understand what I'm saying. But I think there's an intent to destroy the family. And it's very sad when you see it on the face of what the average American goes through.
Charles, I'm sorry, and this has been very interesting, and I'd like to carry on, but I have a conference call coming up, and I have to prepare for it.
All right.
So I'd like to kind of wind this down, and you guys can continue talking if you want. But I would like to continue to talk to you with you later, Todd,
Okay.
and also Charles, and both of you guys. One final question I have for both of you is: are you making applications to get your medical license and your law license back?
For me, at this stage of the game, it's a moot point for me, because the reason they came at me was unfounded, and there was nothing I had done wrong. But what they do have is the fact that I underwent brain surgery, and brain surgery affects my short-term memory if you get me on number sequences past about 5. And they use that as a ploy to play me. And that was why. I mean, you have to understand, I turned down an opportunity to get my PhD and to be an attending professor at Stanford, because I did not want to leave my daughter. Had I accepted that and left my daughter, none of this would have happened. This is pure, it was a political play that was done. And I know how it was played. The problem of it is that you cannot beat certain things. Now, there are other things I'm doing. And I think that, if one of the events that I'm going to do is very successful, that'll be great. For me, I'm okay financially. The thing of it is that what you don't know is that I also triggered the FDA to come in and slam 2 major corporations for flaws in their products. And that created a whole nother whirlwind. I hurt Covidien, which is a major corporation, and that one of their stapling devices had to be removed from the federal market because of me. And then Endogastric Solutions, which is out of Redmond, Washington. The FDA investigators flew into my home to go through the device. They flew into San Jose, and they put an on-site monitor within the facility to correct what was going on that I exposed. So there are some very wealthy people who knew what I exposed. And I'm sorry, but I'm ethical.
All right. Okay.
Have a good time with your meeting.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, you guys. I'm going to take off. All right. Bye-bye.
See you later, Bill. Well, Todd, I'll answer part of that question. I know I've told you, but just since we're on this show together, I'll just say that I have considered trying to reinstate my law license several times, and passing the bar exam would not be a big problem at all. But they have this thing called the moral fitness qualification, and oddly enough, I think that what you described as the disruptive physician is kind of the standard for moral turpitude among lawyers. If you cause trouble, you're a bad person. You're morally unfit. You're disturbed. And when I was in Texas several years ago and my mother died, I made inquiries about reestablishing my license in Texas, and of course, two of the key facts in my history in Texas is that when these troubles started back in 1997, my series of civil rights cases, I pissed off the then governor of Texas. You might have heard of him.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember.
Initials GWB, and then after I was, removed from my official capacity as a lawyer, I ended up in this family court, divorce court situation because my wife was not pleased with the change in our lifestyle resulting from my no longer having a law license. And at that point, I managed to piss off the then Attorney General of Texas, Mr. Greg Abbott, who is now the governor. And Greg Abbott basically made getting rid of me permanently one of his top priorities. And so when I went to Texas bar specialty attorneys to try to, see what it would take to reinstate my license, they told me, well, your case is very unusual. Normally, you've been out for so long, you haven't had any real legal trouble. You're not on drugs. You're not an alcoholic. Seem relatively psychologically sound. Only relatively, not absolutely, but relatively. You would think that you would have a good chance, but because of the political context of it, they're going to fight it very hard. I want the bar attorney said, the best one I talked to, the cheapest one I talked to, said, I want $25,000 down. I'm going to charge you $500 an hour. And I estimate it's going to cost roughly $150,000 to get you back in, and I guarantee nothing.
Yeah, I know. Trust me, I understand the feeling. I have the same scenario. That's what they all want. Now, let me ask you this bizarre question. Given the scenario of this country today, is it unreasonable to make a movement to file, I don't know what you'd call it. It wouldn't be an amicus brief, but maybe it would be. To file something with the U.S. Supreme Court to state something of this context, that we, the American people, are the United States of America, and that our congressmen and senators, except for national security, should not have closed and private meetings, as is being ordained by all these people. Even with Trump the other day, they tried to claim that. And in light of the fact that so many of our senators and congressmen have personal and business relationships with foreign countries, and they are failing to uphold their oath of office and are not securing the United States that we call for, I don't know. All those that are subject to that to be immediately either removed from office or required to undo these issues and to take the oath, or some wacky scenario.
You're talking revolution.
I know what I'm talking.
So you cannot ask nine people on the Supreme Court to overthrow the government. They don't have the power, or they don't even have the theoretical power to do that. There's nothing in the Constitution that
Constitution says you must take an oath of office to uphold the Constitution and protect the American people, and they're not doing it.
But you're basically you're asking the Supreme Court to judge the qualifications of the members of Congress, when in fact it's Congress that is empowered in the Constitution to judge the qualifications of the Supreme Court justices.
But that's asking the wolf to watch the henhouse.
Well,
I'm just asking, would that cause a stir?
It would cause nothing. Unfortunately, to ask this in court would cause nothing, because they would rule that it was a political question and that they had no jurisdiction.
But their failure to honor their oath.
They are the judges of that. I mean, you basically have to invoke a higher authority, and you would have to say that the people have to exercise their right, their God-given right, to replace the government because it has fallen. The government, the integrity of the government has fallen below the minimum acceptable standard because of this godless disregard of oaths. I mean, that's how I would phrase it, and it is a statement of revolution.
I understand what it is.
Yeah, but I mean, it can't be done through the court system.
Oh, I know that. Just like fathers' rights can't be done through the court system.
Well, I don't know what, in the very beginning, Bill had mentioned that in some countries like Lebanon, you have to opt into a value system, either Christian, Jewish, or Muslim,
right,
in your marriage, and that you're kind of stuck with that, and that you can only you can only escape from marriage through divorce according to the values and norms of the group you opted into. And so there are basically, in Lebanon at least, and maybe some other countries, there are potentially three family court systems, depending on which tribe you belong to, basically, Christian, Jewish, or Muslim. I've often thought that, in a multicultural America, if we can't have the uniformity that we once had, that maybe we should start splitting up jurisdictions like that.
The problem of it is that violates Constitution, number one. Everybody would have different rules. Because marriage, I understand you view marriage as religion, not law, but that's not how the country views it. But more importantly, do you really believe that you have true Christians in this country who would interpret the Bible appropriately?
Well, again, the moral decay that you're talking about is the justification for revolution. I mean, are there enough people who care about moral uprightness that there could be such a revolution? That's probably the more embarrassing question, that most people hear about morality and they're like, oh my God, you're so old-fashioned, you're just so out of date, this is not how people think anymore. And again, this is why I'm in the American Freedom Party right now, because I believe that we have to step outside of the establishment completely, the current establishment, and we have to look for a new way. The original name of this party was the American Third Position. And frankly, the American Third Position has never been very, very well defined. And I'm hoping that I've now found a place where I can go about trying to define it.
The problem of it is that Trump's done as good a job as anyone creating a third party. Because the people who support Trump are not Republicans. They're not Democrats. The last person who came close to doing that was, what was the guy's name? Started with a P.
Ross Perot.
Ross Perot. Someone got to Ross Perot.
Well, I mean, he was a corporate man. I mean, I would say that Ross Perot also never carried a single state. The last effective.
But he dropped out. If you remember, he dropped.
He dropped out in 2000. I think or 96 maybe it was the last time he ran. He didn't drop out in 92, which was his high water mark.
No, he did drop out. He didn't totally drop out. He was on the ballots, but he did all this stuff to basically say he didn't want to run. A lot of people were angry in 92.
Well, the bottom line was he did not carry a single state. And so really the last two, if you want to call them third party candidates, were George Corley-Wallace and Barry Goldwater. Barry Goldwater was the Republican nominee, but the states he carried made him look very much like a third party. They were almost exactly the same states that George Corley-Wallace carried. And it is interesting. I mean, okay, honest question. Do you think any of this would have happened to you if you were a black man?
As far as the child, yes, the black man would have had less chances than I had.
Considering that your parental rights were ultimately taken away, how can you do worse than that?
No, he would never have had the time that I had in the beginning.
Why?
Because he's a black man.
Well,
now, I'm not talking about nationwide. I'm talking about.
Are there any black doctors at all in your area?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I mean, are they the subjects? I mean, if I don't think is there a black doctor you would consider to be your equal?
No.
Okay. So I'm asking you a question. Do you think if there were a black doctor who were your equal, that what you're saying was true? Or are you saying that statistically in America, black men don't get custody? Because I do understand that black men don't get custody in America, but the reason is most black men are underemployed at best. At least 50% of them have major serious criminal records.
No, I understand that, but I'm telling you, it wouldn't have mattered. I can tell you, I know another very wealthy white man in Ocala who was flat out told, you're simply a father. You're allowed every other weekend, 1 day a week. 5 years before I went through this. And they told him, live with it or we will ruin you.
Fine. No, but you said this is another.
See, they gave him the courtesy of telling him that. Had he been a black man, they wouldn't have told him that.
Why do you say that? I mean, that's interesting, but why do you say that?
Okay, I'll give you two examples. A family, black family here, had no criminal records. Been here for over 200 years. Owned.
Ocala hasn't been there for 200 years. They can't have been there for 200 years.
Well, they've been here a long damn time. They were here before Ocala was here.
Okay.
Trust me. And they own lots of land. Okay. And they wanted the land, one portion of land to build the jail on and to put it in the ownership of Judge Futch, who leases the land to the county for $1 per day per inmate.
$1 per day per inmate?
Yes.
There's no incentive there to arrest more people, is there?
So the bottom line of it is that the son or the grandson was arrested for speeding. And they beat him and trumped up all kinds of charges. And they either turned the land over or he would be dealt with.
When was this?
Hold on, man. I'm trying to plug the computer in.
Okay.
It was a long time ago. It was before I got here. That trust was recently unsealed back in 2013. I actually published it. That's the facts of that case. No one challenged me in any way that I stated and published a falsity. The second case that I will tell you is there's a black family that used to own a very large concrete factory here and had crews going all over pouring concrete. And his son, now his grandson got in trouble. His grandson was in the wrong crowd, bad crowd. And he got arrested on federal charges. And he went to Mark Shelnut and asked Shelnut to represent him. The son did, or the grandson did. And Shelnut said, I'll be glad to, but I need 20 grand up front. And the family provided the money up front. And they went to the federal court hearing in Jacksonville. And prior to the hearing, Mark Shelnut walked up to the grandfather and said, you own the company, you have the money, not your grandson. You will sign this agreement that you are co-responsible for all legal fees, or I will not walk in that courtroom and represent your grandson.
And he said this on the day of trial?
The day of trial prior to going to the courtroom. I've heard it from the old man himself. He signed the agreement, walked in the courtroom, and Shelnut said, Your Honor, I have no defense to present. The grandson went to jail for many years. The grandfather walked up to Shelnut and said, you are a suck-ass piece of shit. Go screw yourself. A month later, Shelnut sent him a bill, and the grandfather said, you did not do your job. You were inappropriate. I'm not responsible. I signed this under duress. Shelnut took the letter, went to a judge, and had the old man arrested and put in jail until he issued payment.
Well, I mean, I do not understand how Florida has gotten, or maybe is it just Shelnut that can do this? I mean,
it's Ocala. No, it's Ocala. It's Ocala because the people who control Ocala are the old guard white people. Whereas if you go to Miami, you have the black group, the Hispanic group, the white group, and they battle each other and keep some balance.
Interesting. Neither one of those cases, of course, was a family case.
No.
And neither one of those cases really shows a plan to destroy black families.
No. But what I'm telling you is that the corruption here is real.
Oh, I mean, there is corruption everywhere. I mean, it may take different forms in different areas, but I'll tell you that that's very interesting what you say about the judge issuing process to enforce attorney's fees against this black guy, I guess.
Yes.
Because when was that? Because
what it wasn't that the judge ordered him to pay him, and when he didn't pay him, what did he do? He held him in contempt.
Okay, but it's still imprisonment for debt.
No, it's imprisonment for contempt to the judge. That's what they imprisoned me for, was contempt, because I said I don't have the money to pay it.
Okay, but in your case, there is this theory. There is this theory in law that child support is.
No, it had never had to do with child support. My imprisonment never had to do with child support.
It had to do with the attorney's fees in the custody case, which is considered a kind. The state of Florida has kind of deemed that to be a form of child support.
But my divorce was done.
Well, but we were fighting over the conditions of custody. That's what you were fighting. You talked about the time you were fighting to have braces, and the crossbite and the trip to Bahamas.
But my prenup specifically says I don't pay her fees.
Well, but I'm just saying that the state of Florida has created this theory that all attorneys' fees incurred in child custody litigation,
and that's why it's not worth fighting for a child. But you can't win.
Well, okay. So the question then is, you started off asking a question about a very general attack on corruption. Could you do a writ? You were asking if you'd do a writ.
No, I'm just talking about the fact that they're not honoring their constitutional oath.
Well, okay.
Because they're putting illegal foreigners, they're making deals with China and other countries a priority over the welfare of the American people.
Well, they clearly are.
Which is a violation of their oath.
Who in Congress or who in Florida right now, anywhere, is in politics saying this, though?
Well, they all say it. Give me a break.
Who says it?
Okay, look at Rubio. Does Rubio think we need a complete wall across the southern border? Does he think that we should deport illegals and enforce that? Does he think that we should expand our military bases and spend more money? Actually, he has stated that we should spend more money fixing South American countries as a way to reduce immigration.
My question was, is there anybody in Florida articulating your position about the violation of oaths and the violation of the Constitution and the values? I'm not. I didn't say is anybody.
Oh, go on the Trumpsters. Go on the Trumpsters.
Is anybody in Congress or seeking congressional office right now trying to push these positions?
No,
because I don't think they are.
No.
And I mean, when you talk about China, you're talking about the biggest market in the world.
Who cares?
Well, everybody in Congress seems to care deeply about China on the one hand and Israel on the other, arguably for very different reasons.
Well, no, they're against Israel. It's rapidly going anti-Israel.
Is that why Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem?
Trump is not the Congress. Trust me. Congress is going against Israel. And so is the Senate. And mark my words, they're very mad about what he's done with Iran. And remember, China has a major agreement signed with Iran, and they are paying, I forgot how many billions of dollars. They're putting a new road that goes from China right through Azerbaijan and Iran to the Mediterranean.
Iran doesn't border on the Mediterranean.
No, I didn't say they did. They're going through them and across.
Where is it going to? Is it going to end up in Israel?
No, but if you look up the new Silk Road that's being built, look it up.
Okay, I don't know anything about it.
Being built.
But I mean, if Israel is a part of it, that explains something.
No, Israel's not a part of it.
Look this up real fast.
But just look it up later.
Through Iran.
Okay? And take a look at the fact that China is building a military base in Venezuela and in Africa. On the west coast of Africa, they're building a massive military base.
Who in Congress is protesting that at all?
Nobody.
All right. It looks like.
Look at the number of senators and congressmen who have businesses in China. China, and you look at what the New World Order is about. What's the New World Order about? Is it about democracy or about the power being in control?
It's clearly about empowering a global elite.
And China is totally for that. The problem of it is the elite of America think that they can find a way to do dealings with the elite of China, and China doesn't think that way.
Well, okay, but I mean, in other words, what can one do about these things, and what is the relationship between this New World Order with China and the family courts?
Nothing. It has nothing to do with anything, but except for the fact that think about this, in what countries, just think about this, okay? And I'm going to give you several things you had to think about. One, in what countries do you have people that are brought up with the idea that they can think independently of the government and think about right, wrong, and correcting things? What countries have those people?
Truth, justice, and the American way was our dream.
No, just think about it, okay? You think about it being the Western world, don't you?
Yes.
Okay.
But I mean, in other words, there is a connection, because the destruction of the white upper middle class, the destruction of the alpha males, the type A personalities that you were referring to, that's essential to the global elite monopolizing power, isn't it?
It is, but in Europe, what did they do? In Europe, they have taken and done several things in Europe. One, they have extensively socialized the country, so you are dependent on benefits from the government. And they have their taxes so high that you have limited excess resources and do things like Americans do. Okay? It's just different. It's a different society. Now, in the United States, the easier way to do it in the United States was to destroy the core value system of America.
Well, I mean, it seems like
destroy the family,
the two world wars,
and make the people poor. If you have a lot of them on drugs, they're uneducated, they're not able to do things, and you're reducing the number of people who think. And you look at our colleges that are turning them out now, they're all geared towards socialism.
And you don't think that this has something to do with the use of the family courts to destroy people like you and me?
Oh, it was. It started, though, with divorce in 1960 or in the 60s.
No fault divorce, in other words.
Right.
No fault divorce, which was derived directly from the Soviet Union, instituted basically by people who wanted to abolish Christian values.
Right.
And so, is it fair to say that if we could take charge of a Christian revitalization in this country, that would be a step towards the revolution we're talking about?
Well, the problem of it is that religion itself has become corrupt. And most people view religion as corrupt.
The churches have become corrupt. The churches basically are just corporations like every other corporation. They are subject to money and manipulation for political purposes.
I mean, right? Look at the Pope. What has come out the last 3 days?
They're changing the basic prayer.
That's one. What's the other thing that just came out?
I don't know what else the Pope is doing. I was just reading something.
His number one advisor was just convicted of child molestation in Italian or Spanish court. His best friend of 40 years.
Catholic
and
Church.
the Pope just raised the possibility. I mean, look at the confrontation. The Pope didn't raise it. Look at what was just raised by the American Church, the not the cardinal, the whatever, to the Pope. Why is it that the Pope cannot cease judging priests that admit to being gay and living a gay lifestyle?
Okay, I don't understand the question. Can you rephrase that?
Not a cardinal. What was it? What's the next level below a cardinal?
Archbishop.
A bishop.
A cardinal is a special archbishop, basically.
Okay, an archbishop of the United States just asked the Pope, why is it that you are attacking the gay lifestyle and the gay beliefs when we should be incorporating and accepting that priests are gay and choose to lead a gay lifestyle?
Well, that does directly relate to something I was reading right before the show in Breitbart, that the chief Lutheran bishop of Sweden is a lesbian.
Yes.
Have you heard this?
Yes.
That she wants to take all the crosses out of the churches and put directional instructions towards Mecca in them. I mean, the priests have that seems like treason to me. I mean, for an allegedly Christian bishop to be saying that, it's like some sort of bizarre joke. Who could possibly believe that a Lutheran bishop in Sweden would be saying such a thing? I mean, why would she even be willing to be a Lutheran bishop if what she wants to do is institute Islam? It blows my mind. It blows my mind what's going on in this country. And I feel that we have to, I mean, the revolution that we need has to touch every institution. It has to touch, I mean, I'm kind of surprised. Some of the most conservative people I know in the United States, some of the most righteous people I know in the United States are Lutherans. And so it really surprises me that the Lutheran Church in Sweden is that far off, but Sweden's a different country. And the Pope seems like a communist. Now,
well, you have to understand something. It is very easy to interpret Christianity as communism.
You see, I hear that all the time, and I see a gigantic difference. Jesus told us that we have to take care of our fellow man, and that basically this is the way of holiness and God. We have to take care.
There's a difference in being respectful and taking care of people with respect and decency than taking care of them.
Well, but no, Jesus was very practical. He was focused on food and shelter. There's no doubt about that. I mean, his preaching against divorce, for instance, was not so much, it was not about sex. It had nothing to do with sex. It had everything to do with providing for your wife and children. And that you can't cut them loose, as was the custom among the Jews. The Jews would just and the Muslims will just turn wives out very easily, and they'll make them starve. And Jesus said, no, you can't do that. And so Jesus was telling you and me, Jesus was saying to you and me and everyone else that you must love your fellow man. You must care for your fellow man. But at no point does Jesus ever say, and if you don't, your fellow man can take it from you.
No, I understand. No, and there's a difference in taking care of them and making all people equal financially.
I don't believe the word equality ever passed Jesus.
That's what I said. That's not what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Taking care of your fellow man is different than making your fellow man equal with you financially and da 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 da. He never said that, but that's how the new wave interprets.
Well, but in other words, then how the new wave interprets them. In other words, people can twist and pervert the message, but communism is about systematically taking from you and giving to your ex-wife, or taking from me and giving to my ex-wife, or taking from me and giving to Shelnut, or taking.
It's about taking from you and putting it in the hands of the elite. But you have to remember, in China, attorneys have no value in China.
Does anyone have much value? Does anyone's life have much value in China?
No, only the elite.
Even them, how indispensable is any member of the Chinese elite? I'm guessing pretty damn dispensable.
Very dispensable. That's right. You have to keep this small group of people moving in one direction.
And you can eliminate any who don't.
And you have infiltrated the United States.
For the past 40 some odd years, ever since Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon.
It's gotten worse in the last 20.
Oh, clearly. I mean,
and the last 10 has become atrocious. I truly do not believe there's any true secrecy, and I do not believe the CIA. I haven't believed in the CIA in 30 years.
Well, not much argument there. I don't know if you know this, but I lost my wife to a CIA operative. It's kind of when you think about it. But anyhow, Todd, we want to change things, and so I mean, how are we?
It's just like I tell people on divorce. You can have all these little rallies you want to in your little town of 4 people. You can 20 people can write something on the internet and say this. You will not achieve change until you do a march larger than the Civil Rights March to make a change. Just for family court and to stop what's going on in this country, it's going to take a revolution.
Okay, and you were talking about war, and how do you envision this war happening? I mean, lots of people casually mention that there could be a civil war, and I heard a poll recently that I forget what the percentage was, but a very surprising percentage of the American population expect a civil war sometime in our lifetimes. Who's going to start the war? What will the sides be? And how?
I think what's going to start I think is going to start the Civil War is whether it's maybe one thing, it may be a combination of things. But I think if they make a move to deal with Trump the way they want to literally open the borders and to make a move to confiscate guns, what's going to happen is that the confiscation of guns is where it's going to happen, because either, as they believe, 80% of people will say, I can't fight you, here's my gun, and then it's over. Or you got to remember the Revolutionary War was not the majority of Americans. It was a small number in the beginning. And the key is there are a significant number of people, not a majority, nowhere near a majority, that when that attempt to enter homes and confiscate, they will die before they give up their guns. But at that point in time, this is no longer their country. And it will depend on how rapid that wave occurs across the country as to how rapidly the American people pick up the arms. And the police will not yield because they depend on the government for their money. Question is what the military will do.
Well, the military depends on the government, the federal government in particular. I mean, the police at least have some local roots, I guess, theoretically. Anyhow, they've been.
Nope. The military, the retired military, and the military have been in all these wars. They are the ones who will say enough. And maybe 20% of cops. The cops of New York won't. The cops of LA won't.
I would have bet on Dallas and Houston and Austin 20 years ago, but I sure wouldn't bet on them now.
Did you just see what the Supreme Court Justice of California did?
Changed parties because of Kavanaugh?
Yep.
Yeah, I saw that. But I mean, California, of course, it all goes. I mean, Todd, do you really think that it? I mean, what do you? Okay,
She was never a Republican or a Democrat. She's part of the new wave.
Yeah, and she's not white.
I know that.
She's hard to define. I mean, she's not easy to define ethnically at all. She's basically a citizen of the brave new world. Now, we've mentioned race, and you and I have actually argued about this, and it seems like you're sort of coming over to my way of thinking a little bit. To what degree do you think this is about race at this point?
I will tell you, if you talk to Black men my age and older who are responsible people, not trash. They may be poor, but they're responsible. They will tell you the removal of men from families has destroyed the kids. They will tell you that the government is not for the people, and they know the war is coming, and they are prepared. It's not about attacking me. It's about this elite group. They feel as strongly about this, and I will tell you this also. They feel strongly about this too. They see no reason for the dilution of their race to a different color. It's not about hating white people.
Okay, but that's not saying that race isn't important. That's saying that race is more important than anybody wants to admit. I mean, what I have heard and what I have found, I don't think you and I know any black people in common, but what I have heard from particularly black women is that the key reason for the destruction of the black family is that black women cannot find black men worthy to marry because most black men, 50% of black men are either in jail or on parole.
Yep. Of
marriage age. And when you said black men your age, you're talking about, men who are really probably.
Remember this. I was in the 5th grade when we went through desegregation in my hometown. And I will tell you, at that time, they would still occasionally in my white school paddle a student. Very, very rarely. It took something severe to get it done. In the black schools, they paddled very quickly. And the families were required to come in and deal with the children and the parents, and the teachers and the principal. And they all lived in their community and they demanded a behavior. And listen to me, the white families were slowly evolving to a point where they were doing this, that, and the other, and the kids were doing this, that, and the other, and you weren't doing family time and family priorities. Everybody was going their own way. And when they merged them, black teachers said and principals said, we should not be doing away with the paddle. We should not be having the schools be dealing with this without bringing in the families. We are abandoning the family. And it's just moved on and on and on, where now people expect the schools to not only educate, but to socialize, moralize, and raise your children.
Complete abdication of parental responsibility.
That's right.
And
the blacks were the last to give it up.
Now that's interesting.
But to give it up with desegregation.
If blacks were the last to give it up, though, why is there such a high black crime rate? I mean,
the reason for the high crime rate goes back to the fact that, as a general rule, people don't like to hear this. The general IQ of the black population at the time was lower, still is, but it was lower. The job expectations and growth were lower. They were not accepted at other schools. They created their black universities, which were inferior and still remain inferior because of corruption within their own system. And the other thing that people don't realize is that if you look at testosterone levels between white men and black men, it tends to run about 2 to 3 times in black men compared to white men. It's higher. And it takes a black male. They talk about white men mature slower than white women.
Yeah.
Black men mature slower than white men. And one of the things you've got to do is you've got to let people blow steam and have structure to blow steam and blow energy. We've eliminated PE. Think about having a job where you go to school in the morning at 7:30 and get out 2:30 and you sit in a classroom all day. Even an adult can't do that. And that's what we're doing to our kids. No PE, no structure. And who can keep up with a black male? A black father has more energy and stamina at a younger age to keep up and do discipline. There's intent and destruction here, because I can tell you now, if you go to third world black countries where families and tribes still exist, there's much more discipline and direction, and the children do not behave as they do here. And if you look, the first ones that went wild were black. And you look at where white children are today, it's almost as bad among white children as it is black children today.
Well, but the incarceration rates are still much lower among whites than among blacks.
It is. I agree with that. But
I just want to submit a proposal and see what you think of it. I think that what's interesting is that what I've been able to glean from a study of the historical statistics is that back during the evil old days of segregation and Jim Crow, there was not a black crime wave. There was sharecropping. There was, a tendency to, put blacks down. There was unfairness, like the land deal you were telling about earlier. That's a clearly unfair, oppressive deal. There's no doubt about that. That was corrupt. But the civil rights movement did two things. It urged blacks to break the law. It urged blacks to become effectively antisocial against white people. It also gave white people a tremendous incentive to want to find substitutes for segregation. And what I think has gone on is that the white population has used the criminal law to act as a proxy for segregation. But the result of that has been disastrous because it has, in effect, made blacks more dependent. It has destroyed independence. I mean, I could say so many things about how much more independent.
I will tell you this: there may be some reasonableness to what you're saying, but remember this: the United States today has more prisoners than any other country in the world.
Yes, it does. No,
number two, somewhere around 40%, maybe 50%, but I think it's 40% of federal prisoners are non-citizens.
Well, which is to say, primarily Hispanic.
And then, if you take a look at something, you look at young people, what has happened to the black people is now in the full swing of being done to white children. And there's a reason for that. They won't.
I'm not sure I'm following you here. What are you saying exactly?
White children today are following the footpaths of the blacks 20 years ago.
Doing what? I mean, are you saying, I mean, to use my grandmother's phrase, are you saying that white kids today are lazy and good for nothing?
And they're radicalized to not want to do anything. So therefore, the government does what they want to do. There is going to become a day when there will be a mass execution of people by the government. I believe that.
Okay, for what purpose and on what grounds?
To save the world.
Okay, but who will they be targeting? I guess is what I really mean.
Anyone other than themselves. Once everything is automated and robotized, they can eliminate 80% of the world.
Todd, it is 6:30 in New Orleans and it's 7:30 in your part of the world.
Take off. I gotta go.
Would you like to reconvene tomorrow at approximately this time to continue this discussion?
I can't tomorrow. Tomorrow's a busy day for me.
Well, okay. I mean, Bill said earlier that he wants you back. Let's try to reschedule for another time. Would you his regular day? We usually do Wednesday together. Would you like to come back on Wednesday?
Well, her son comes in town Tuesday. For the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be pretty lousy.
Okay, how about Monday then? Would you like to do a follow up on Monday?
I can try Monday.
Okay, let's try to get together on Monday then, because I don't want to drop this where we are, and we need to put in another hour and a half or 2 hours on this.
All right, you take care.
I know exactly where you are. I miss Oklawaha.
All right, you take care. Talk to you later. Bye.
Good night. Say hi to Karen for me.
Bye-bye.
This is Charles Lincoln signing off from New Orleans, Louisiana. That was William Todd Overcash from Oklawaha in Marion County, Florida. Anyhow, it's Friday, December the 14th, and it's 11 days to Christmas. Can you believe it? Another year, unfortunately, shot to hell. Good night, everybody. Talk to you later.